Hi to everyone still watching this channel. Yeah, both of you. I wanted to provide a bit of a closer look at my melee Necromancer today. I've uploaded a video or two recently where I've cleared a bunch of red maps fairly casually. But I never really explained what I'm doing or how I'm doing it, so I'd like to get into that a little more today. So the basic idea of this build is to just overwhelm enemies and to just clear maps and wipe out bosses with minion spam. As in, just create as many minions as I can manage and just flood the place with them basically, as opposed to, say, having a smaller amount of minions which are then specialized and buffed up with a lot of support gems. So, the main ability of this build is the reworked Dominating Blow, which had a bit of an update in 3.4, I think it was, in combination with Herald of Purity. So basically, the way it works now is you kill something and it turns into a minion, or even if you just, punch a unique enemy, like a boss, you get a certain chance to create minions, meaning that Dominating Blow is now even viable in boss fights, even if they don't have any ads, if there's no trash for you to kill, which makes it a lot more useful than it used to be. So this is what we're maining on. This is what we're going for in combination with dual Scourges. The Scourge, each of these claws gives 70% extra damage to minions and to ourselves. So when we stack them, that's an extra 140% damage right there. But we'll get into the detail a little later. It's not the most serious of builds. I wouldn't exactly call it hardcore viable because it's a bit squishy. I mean, you can see I've got just under 5k health at the moment, which isn't ideal. But again, with the help of tons upon tons of minions and some golems and whatnot, I still feel fairly safe with it. It clears red maps fairly easily, and you get super fast boss kills with it. And I've cleared stuff like Atziri, the Elder. In my previous video, you can see me running maps all the way up to tier 14 without any trouble whatsoever. To be perfectly honest, I haven't really tried anything higher level than that, simply because I don't have anything. Yeah, I'm not in a large guild or whatever. I'm a fairly casual player, so 14 is as high as it got for me this far. But it was all fairly easy up to that point, so I'm sure I can take it further once I get the chance. Yeah, so let's get into the build, shall we? Now, let's start by having a look at our gear and then our skill gems and all that. The single most important thing, without a doubt, is this claw here, the Scourge, which we're dual wielding, simply because whenever we hit something with it, we get a 70% increase to our minion damage, which is also applied to our character. As it says right there, increases and reductions to minion damage also affect you. And since we're dual wielding it, it makes a difference of 140%. On top of that, whenever we kill something with these claws, there's a chance to summon a spectral wolf. And that's an extra minion, and since we want to stack minions like crazy, that's exactly what we're going for here. Right now, through passives and gear and whatnot, we've got 236% extra minion damage, and that should go up by an extra 140% whenever we hit something. So let's find something to punch. And as you can see, that's 376% extra damage applied to both our minions and our character, and that is rather impressive, to say the least. And this is how our build works. Now, the rest of our gear is incredibly optional. Basically, none of the other items I'm using make or break the build. I'm just using it because it's the best I have. So let's just start from the top here. My helmet, at this moment, I'm using a simple bone helmet, which has a decent life roll on it and has some fairly good resistances on it. At the beginning of the video, you can see how I'm using an Abyss helmet instead, the one that gives a bit of a proc, and then every once in a while you shoot these green fireballs in every single direction for a bit of extra AoE. So you're free to, go anywhere you want with this. It's not the single most important item. Personally, I'm a big fan of the bone helmet simply because of the minion damage, but, use whatever you've got. Same for jewelry. I'm personally a big fan of Carnage Heart simply because on top of the fairly high attributes and some resistance bonuses, you do get a damage bonus while you're leeching, because you know the thing with claws is, since they've got built-in life leech anyway, you're constantly leeching while you're punching stuff, and with that, you know, you'll be dealing a little bit of extra damage while you're hitting stuff. Of course, if you have an amulet with decent life roll on it, or just, you know, something that's you know, works better for you, then that's perfectly cool. Same with the rings. I'm using rings here with high resistances and a bit of added damage and with high life rolls, but again, it's by no means mandatory. You can use whatever works best for you. For amulet, for gloves, gauntlets, whatever, hands, waist and feet, let's go with that. I'm using the abyss items. I'm using Tomb Fist, Stygian Vice and a bubonic trail. Yeah, that's it. Because bubonic trail, these boots, these abyss boots, I lucked out on them. I found them the other day. These ones basically give you, not basically, exactly give you a 10% damage bonus for every single abyss jewel that you're using. It's relatively easy to stack them, and then abyss jewels are nice to have in general, yeah. So I'm using this because, you know, I've got 1, 2, 4. I've got 4 abyss jewels at the moment, so that already results in a damage bonus of 40%. And on top of that, you know, these boots give you a 5% increase to life. You get a 30% movement speed increase, so they're far from the worst boots in the game. And on top of that, you make corpses explode while you stomp over them, which is always nice and, you know, deals a bit of extra damage. On top of that, this is a fairly generic Stygian Vice, which just has a bit of life and, you know, some resistances and shit on it. You can put in there whatever you want. Again, like I said, I'm using it for the Abyss slot. And on top of that, I'm using Tomb Fist, again, because 2 Abyss slots, and because it's got, you know, a bit of extra attack speed, bit of extra life, and you get the option to intimidate and maim enemies, which causes you to deal a little bit of extra damage. Again, there's plenty of other items you could put in there, so this is by no means like the best there is or whatever. Like I said, it's what I've got. For the armor, personally, I'm a big fan of Belly of the Beast because of the massive increase to life you get on it. Even then, as you can see, we're at only a little over 5k right now, which is fine in my opinion for a minion based build, because, you know, they take a lot of the damage off of you. Of course, you'll still have to be super careful with ranged attacks with things like AoE damage and whatnot, so it's not the tankiest of builds. I like to have a bit of extra life. If you feel if you're feeling brave, or if you get life some other way, then it's also perfectly fine to go with something like, say, a Vis Mortis to, you know, make your specters a little bit stronger and minions in general. The main reason why I'm using this on top of life is because I lucked out and I got 6 linked sockets on it. And that's where we're putting our dominating blow. So we'll look into the skill gems next. First of all, before anything though, you can also use a dominating blow with just 4 or 5 links if that's all you've got. So it's, again, it's not mandatory to go for 6 links, but, you know, every little helps and all that. So here's our dominating blow. This is the main ability of this build, because basically whenever we hit something, it turns into minions. Even if it's just a boss these days, you get a chance to create a minion just from punching a unique enemy. So basically we're constantly flooding the place with, you know, up to 9 minions generated by this. On top of that, I think you also get like 2 or 3 magic minions and 1 rare minion or something like that. It doesn't matter. The most important thing is, if nothing else, you can easily maintain your 9 normal sentinels through this at all times, which is super helpful and really adds to our damage. And, you know, it's super fun to use. That's basically what makes this build. On top of that, I'm using multi-strike, and I'm using maim. I'm using a melee physical damage support. I'm using lesser poison. I'll explain that in a second. And I'm using ruthless. Again, you can mix it up a little bit. For instance, if you're not a massive fan of just strictly single target DPS, you could replace one of these for a melee splash, or for something like Ancestral Call, I think it's called. You know, hitting additional targets, basically. In my opinion, it makes more sense to just have strong single target damage, simply because whenever you hit something, you immediately get minions which attack enemies around you anyway. And yeah, sure, you won't be one-shotting entire packs of monsters. It's not the single best build for clear speed anyway. but you know, the moment you face a boss, a strong single target enemy, you'd have to switch out these AoE or splash damage gems for single target gems. Anyway, I'm lazy. I'll just, you know, keep on going with this. But if you wanted to, you could also replace some of these with extra AoE, you know, extra targets, whatever. If that's how you roll, that's perfectly cool. Now, the reason why we're using lesser poison is because we're using Herald of Agony. This one, like most things in our build, is highly optional, meaning you could also just, you know, use something like a Herald of Ash, which works really well with a relatively high physical damage, which, you know, and then results, you know, convert some of that into extra fire damage and whatnot. The main reason why I'm using the Herald of Agony is that, you know, it's an extra minion, which is nice, so that minion benefits from our nearly 400% extra minion damage, and of course from the fact that I'm trying to get as many minions as possible just for fun. And on top of that, as you can see right now, he's only level 13, but the higher you level him, you get more and more and more added damage and added attack speed and whatnot added to the minion, you know, depending on how many stacks of poison, or virulence as it's called here, you put on an enemy. So yeah, basically the moment you fight something slightly tougher, like a rogue exile or a boss or something, you get somewhere between 20 and I think the cap is 40 stacks of it. That thing will hit so hard, it basically just wipes out everything on screen in seconds. It's absolutely amazing. So I'm a big fan of it. But again, you know, if you don't like it, if you're not a massive fan of it, you don't have to. I know that poison right now isn't exactly the single most amazing thing ever. I'm using it because it's fun, and you know, on top of that, basically just by using Herald of Agony you get a 20% chance to poison. So on top of that, I'm using lesser poison, which gives you another 40% chance to poison. So with that we're at 60% chance to poison. It also adds a bit of chaos damage, and through the skill tree, I'll be showing that in a second, we're getting another 40% chance to poison. So we've got 100% chance to poison on hit, meaning we build up these stacks of virulence fairly easily and fairly quickly, which is how Herald of Agony shines. Now, as for other skills, again, these are completely optional. They're by no means optimized or ideal or perfect. It's just what I'm using, and as you've seen in videos and like at the beginning of this video, it works for me. If you have any better ideas, it's perfectly free to replace things here and there. And you know, this is what I do basically. Summon Holy Relic is fairly self-explanatory. It's one of the new abilities, and the relic has this nice effect where whenever you hit something, the relic triggers an aura that doesn't just deal physical damage to enemies around you, but on top of that it grants regeneration to your allies, basically meaning minions which may be a tad on a squishy side and may not be super useful on higher levels unless you buff the absolute shit out of them, might still be viable. Basically this thing helps keep all of your minions alive even in the toughest fights, except maybe, say, you know, your zombies are still going to die a lot. In my opinion, zombies are fairly worthless, but we'll get to that in a second. So Holy Relic, absolutely recommended. I would always use this in any minion build because it's just, you know, it's a single slot. You don't need to add any support links to it to make it useful. It's just that nice to have. And we're using a stone golem simply because, you know, they taunt enemies and they add you a bit of extra regeneration. It's just super nice to have. I like stone golems, I'm a big fan of them, so that's what I'm going with. And on top of that, we're also using a flame golem because the flame golem passively buffs our damage. And, you know, again, it deals a bit of damage to enemies itself, which is always nice to have around. Then on the other claw, we've got Animate Guardian, which is super optional. As you can see on his gear right now, I didn't put anything massively exotic or powerful on him. It's just another meat shield. They're incredibly hard to kill, especially if you have a Holy Relic running around. And, you know, just another thing that hits your enemies in your place. What you could do instead, because we've also got our wording blades on here, our movement ability, you could just put a Fortify on there, which is a bit of a no-brainer. I reckon most people at this point use stuff like wording blades with a Fortify to give you that 20% extra resistance. I don't really need it to be perfectly honest, and I like having the extra guardian, but if you'd rather have a fortify or something completely different, that's perfectly up to you. Faster attacks to make Whirling Blades move a little bit faster, because this is our main movement ability to help us get in and out of trouble and, you know, move around the map a little bit faster. That's what I'm using. There are different movement abilities out there if you have your own personal preference, but, you know, this is what I'm using. It works for me. For our gloves, we're using the Herald of Purity. Again, a Herald of Purity, just like our Dominating Blow. It helps us generate some extra minions. Basically, we're getting 4 extra minions out of it, which, you know, is nice to have. And again, these minions can also appear just by hitting unique enemies, I believe. Does it say here somewhere? It probably does. 20% chance to summon a Sentinel of Purity when you hit a unique enemy there. So, you know, just basically extra minions which happen, which work at all the time in every kind of battle, even boss fights, whether or not you get any trash that you can kill or not. So, you know, good to have. On top of that, I'm using Haste as an aura. For 2 reasons. First of all, the obvious, you know, it gives us faster attack speed, and movement speed makes our character a bit stronger, and of course every minion around us, so, you know, bigger damage for everybody. And through our passive skill tree, I'll show that in a second, we'll also get a bit of a damage and resistance bonus just for running an aura, so, you know, it's always nice to have. On top of that, we're using Summon Skeleton. That's Val Skeletons, actually. That's a bit of an oh shit button. Basically, what I like to do when I fight a boss is I summon Val Skeletons and just farts out 36 insta-skeletons all over the screen, and they quickly overwhelm and decimate any boss. So that's super nice to have. On top of that, it also means you get to just summon regular skeletons. And again, through the skill tree, you can summon like 2 or 3 of them at once. And yeah, they're actually fairly decent now. They deal decent amounts of damage, especially if you get the near 400% extra minion damage. So they're really nice. And I like using regular skeletons when, say, there's a pack of monsters nearby and they're a bit too dangerous to like face head on all by myself. I send in the Skelly Boys first, you know, cast a few Bone Boys, have them attack the enemies first, and then you jump in there and start punching them. It makes things a little safer, basically. On top of that, we've got Lightning Golem. We're using 3 golems in this build, and Lightning Golems increase our attack speed, which passively raises our DPS, so I'm all for it. And I'm using Summon Phantasm on kill. This one is completely optional. In fact, Summon Phantasm isn't really all that great because it only works on kill, yeah? So if you fight a boss that doesn't have any minions or whatever, you won't be getting any Phantasms. That means you've basically wasted a support link. It doesn't really matter at this point because we're dealing so much damage. And personally, I just think it's hilarious because whenever my Lightning Golem or my Skeletons kill something, they get Phantasms. So my pets have their own pets. It's, you know, it's a bit of a silly thing. Of course, you could just as easily just put any type of damage boosting support gem in there, whether it's something like faster attacks or I don't know, added chaos damage, added lightning damage, or multi strike or whatever. It's completely up to you. I'm just using the Phantasms for the fun of it, and, you know, to get some more minions on top of the ones I already have. In our helmet slot, we have the aforementioned Herald of Agony. We've got Raised Spectre. Again, this one's completely optional. You could just add an extra minion damage to it or whatever you want. With our current build, we only get a single Spectre, but, you know, like I said, it's more about quantity, not quality. So having an extra minion, why the hell not? And, you know, having something like a Herald of Kitava with 400% extra damage, is still great, you know, may as well use it. Then we're using Raised Zombie because we're getting some extra physical resistance through our passive skill tree when we have zombies. Other than that, they're a bit shit. Yeah, zombies, I've never actually seen my zombies kill anything. They also die really, really fast, but, you know, why the hell not? They're extra meat shields. If you don't like zombies, don't use them. Basically, you could also put your, you know, you could change your skill tree a bit, and instead of getting the extra physical resistance from zombies, you could buff your Spectre some more, or, you know, whatever. I'm using this one. It's not the single greatest thing about this build ever, but, you know, it gets the job done. And then we've got a bit of minion damage. Again, this could be anything. You could replace it for whatever you want. I'm using this one just because why the hell not, you know, bit of extra damage. And yeah, that's pretty much it for gear and skill gems. So let's have a look at the passive skill tree next. Almost nothing really surprising about the skill tree here. Probably doesn't require a lot of explanation. Basically, I started off by heading to the right, where there's a bit of energy shield and minion stuff, because minion damage is always nice to have. And we're not really using any spells, so there's no point in spell damage or cast speed, which sadly also means that Deep Wisdom isn't super useful to us, but you know, we get some mana and life here, and we get some extra minion damage, and yeah, basically more minion stuff. Then unfortunately, as you can see, again, spell damage, cast speed is not great for someone wasting a whole bunch of points here until we get to the more interesting part of the tree, for us that is, because again we get more minion damage, and from there we're heading towards our first life node. Minion life and elemental resistances, in my opinion, really isn't all that important or necessary, because since our most important minions are all just insta throwaway minions, you know, from Dominating Blow and Herald of Purity, if they die, it doesn't matter. They'll instantly come back anyway. So, you know, forget minion life. We're just picking it because we have no other choice here. So we're going past that. We're skipping these two here because again, not really needed. Bit of extra life is always good. Also chaos resistance, which in my opinion you can never have enough of. And we're going all the way to sovereignty, because with that we're getting a 14% reduce to our mana reserved, which is great because it means we can stack more heralds and auras and stuff. And it also buffs our auras a little bit. I'm skipping the aura effect because 6% increased effect for auras. Whatever. If you want to, go for it. But you know, it's one skill point I'm not massively keen on. And we're heading downstairs here a bit because 14% extra damage and minion damage, always nice to have. Also, you know, increased attack speed and strength, and it's a no-brainer. You go for it. Besides, it's, you know, it's right there anyway. Then we buff our minion damage and our attack damage. I don't know. Right now I'm level 95. If I ever manage to get any higher, maybe I'll also get these damage nodes here if I can pick them up. Because again, you know, 12%, 14% increased damage. Why the hell not? I'm not entirely sure if I can even pick this at all, because it's like the starting node of the Templar, I think. I'm not 100% sure how it works because I'm a noob, you know, but whatever. This one we could definitely pick up if we get the chance. Getting a bit of life here. You could also pick up this one. I didn't because I did something weird at the bottom of the skill tree. We'll show this in a second. Elemental damage, not super useful to us. I picked it mostly in order to get to Holy Dominion. We want this one for the 12% increased global physical damage and the elemental resistances. And yeah, chance to freeze, shock and ignite doesn't really matter to us because we don't crit. But whatever. I've also picked up this jewel socket here because we're using the primordial jewels and the you know, anima stone in order to get 3 golems rather than just 1. Again, this isn't mandatory. If you're not a big fan of golems or whatever, then just use the stone golem and then you can forego these jewel sockets or put some minion jewels in there or whatever. You could put something in like what's it called, the unending hunger or something, you know, the thing that buffs damage to it basically gives soul thirst to your specters, or you could put one of the zombie jewels in there, which you know, gives the zombies reduced cooldowns on their slam, or you know, or just don't use jewel sockets at all and put these points into extra life instead, like extra defenses. It's, you know, plenty of options right there. If you do go for this one, you should also get Sanctity because a bit of extra armor and life regen is always nice to have. Again, I didn't because we're going for a bit of poison further down the tree. So, you know, this one's up to you. It's probably going to be a bit divisive. Again, life, no-brainer. You know, another jewel socket because golems. Then we pick up the Resolute Technique because our build really doesn't work around critical hits. We don't benefit from critical hits very much. And without Resolute Technique, we'd only end up with some 65% chance to hit or something. So may as well go for Resolute Technique. It only costs 1 point and we'll hit 100% of the time. We won't crit. This is perfectly fine. At the end of the day, we just want to stack poison for our Herald of Agony, and we just want to keep on hitting all the time in order to get more and more heralds and minions. So, you know, we don't need to crit, we just need to keep on hitting. So this one is super helpful. Again, more life and resistances because of course we've got a bit of extra single-handed weapon damage and attack speed, again, should be fairly self-explanatory. We're going all the way down into the life here as well. And, you know, you can pick up all of these life nodes if you have the points for it. I just went as far into it as I could manage, and down here we've got another jewel sockets because, again, golems, and then we're spending a whole lot of points just to get over here. You know, again, depending on your playstyle, whether or not you even care for this, you don't have to go there. You can also pick up additional life nodes, life gain on hit, and that sort of thing. Personally, I went over there because I'm a big fan of Master of the Arena, which gives us extra life regen and extra physical damage, and it also gives us a bit of extra attack range because we don't have any AoE, so a bit of range is nice to have. Extra strength is always great for melee based characters as well. Then extra life, extra evasion and extra armor, which is always great to have. Then we've got Art of the Gladiator, which I feel is also super awesome simply because it removes movement penalties from our armor, because, you know, we want to be quick, we want to be getting across the map really nice and fast, so, you know, may as well go for that. Besides, attack speed is always great to have to stack those bleeds and, well, stack the poison faster and get more minions even faster. So, of course we won't benefit from the global accuracy rating, but even then, it's still nice to have. Besides, a bit of extra dexterity is always good to have because we're using a bunch of green gems here and there. Then I'm using all the dual wield damage nodes from here. I'm skipping dual wield accuracy for obvious reasons. And then we're going all the way into armor and evasion. Not massively keen on it at this point because we've already got resistances going through the roof. You can see that here too. Yeah, we've got 107 to 120% resistances and 10% chaos resistance, which is nice. But, you know, like if you were on a map that lowers your resistances, you'll probably still be ending up at the cap or fairly close to it. So, you know, I like to overcap resistances a little bit. Your mileage may vary. Again, if you don't like this, don't pick it. But I'm also picking it in order to get to this whole dual wield node, because you get extra dual wield damage, chance to block on dual wield, extra physical damage, extra attack speed, blah, blah, blah. Just if you dual wield claws, it's a nice node to have. And from there we're going all the way over here to bleed and poison. And this one is super optional. Basically you're really just using this if, like me, you're a big fan of the Herald of Agony, because this one helps you in combination with lesser poison support in the Herald of Agony to get to 100% chance to poison on hit. And with that, you know, basically keep stacking those poisons. Personally, I don't feel like the poison itself does really make much of a difference because we don't have a dedicated poison build. Yeah, we don't have anything that massively boosts our poison damage. And yes, sure, you get a bit of extra poison damage through these things and whatnot, but you'll never like hit an enemy a few times and then just watch them wilt away and die in seconds from the massive amounts of poison. That's really not a thing with this build. However, just being able to stack like 40 virulence on a boss and then watching the Herald of Agony go to town is so beautiful, is so fun, is such a great thing to do. So that's what I'm going with. Again, if you don't use Herald of Agony, if you don't like that sort of thing, you can skip that entire part of the skill tree and put it into more life, more armor, more resistances. Because again, you know, like I said, we're slightly squishy. Right now we've only got 35% physical damage reduction. Again, in my opinion, with you know, an animated guardian and with a stone golem, it's fine. You'll have to read certain boss attacks and try not to get hit straight in the face. But other than that, we're resistance capped, way over capped. In fact, we've got 10% chaos resistance, which is nice. We've got some 24% block chance, which isn't the worst considering we're not using any shields or whatever. So, you know, it's not terrible, but it's also not the tankiest of builds. So, you know, if you want to use any of these armor nodes on top or want to go for even more life, then that is perfectly fine. You can skip all the poison stuff. And that sums up the build. Is it super hardcore, mega ultimate level endgame viable? I honestly don't know, because like I said, I think the highest I've ever found map wise was like tier 14, and if you look at my previous video, I'm clearing that stuff super quickly and easily. Again, it's not the same kind of clear speed that you get on builds that are especially designed to just take out entire packs and whole screens full of monsters in a split second, but it gets the job done, I suppose. What I like about it is just the idea that you're really using a Necromancer build in melee. Yeah, so it's not just like a gimmick thing where you just attack in melee because you can, but it's really meant to be used in that way, because first of all, the Scourge, you know, the extra minion damage is only applied if you actually hit something with the claws. The other thing is that just, you know, summoning extra minions through Herald of Purity or Dominating Blow, or stacking all the virulence and poison for the Herald of Agony, all of that only works if you actively fight and take part in the battle rather than just sitting back and using spells or spamming totems or throwing, I don't know, Spectral Throw, that's it. Yeah, I mean, not that there's anything wrong with these kind of builds or playstyles, but personally I just wanted to just have a witch that goes in there and punches things in the face. I know I could also just play something like a Guardian and spec them around stuff like, you know, the Herald of Purity and Dominating Blow. They have some very nice Ascendancy passives for that. Oh yeah, Ascendancies. We should probably look at Ascendancies, shouldn't we? Okay, right, Ascendancy. I totally forgot because I'm stupid. We're going with Commander of Darkness because Aura, yeah? You want auras. Personally, right now I'm using only one aura because then I'm using the Herald of Purity and Herald of Agony. You could also stack multiple auras, I suppose. I'm using this because auras are great if you use minions for obvious reasons. Like that way, unlike a Herald, an aura buffs all your minions as well, like everything around you, not just your own character. And on top of that, whenever something's affected by your aura, including yourself, you get 30% increased damage, because if there's anything this build needs right now, it's even more damage on top. And, you know, 20% extra elemental resistances, because hey, we're not totally overcapped already. On top of that, I'm going with Invoker, because again, extra minion damage. Extra minion lives just in there, don't really need it, but whatever. Convocation cooldown. I don't use Convocation, but hey, it's nice to have if you use it, I suppose. I'm using Fleshbinder because zombies are a bit awful. I'm not a fan of them, but with this we can fart out 6 zombies at least, and they'll give us 6% extra melee physical resistance, both to ourselves and our minions. And you know, it's better to have an extra 6 resistance than not to, so why the hell not? Alternatively, like if you're a big fan of Spectres and use maybe more than just one, you can go for Soul Weaver. I'm not a massive fan of Mistress of Sacrifice personally, because you have to like keep spamming offering skills. I'm lazy, you know, like with my current build you just run from one pack to another, or Whirling Blades over there and then just punch him in the face, and the rest happens all by itself. But you know, if you're keen on offerings, the Mistress of Sacrifice is still nice to have. Puppet Master, whatever, it's an extra 30% damage whenever you use a minion skill. Sure, whatever. I'd much rather just get the extra damage through using Commander of Darkness. But, you know, for instance, if let's say you don't like zombies, and instead of Fleshbinder you could also pick Puppet Master. And one thing that I personally enjoy a lot is Bone Sculptor, because we're using Deval Skellies. And on top of that, I like using regular skeletons as scouts, so to speak. Like I said, you know, if there's a big, strong, scary pack of monsters, and you don't want to attack them head on and get all of them to target you, send in the skeletons first, and this way you get 2 extra skeletons. You'll be summoning 3 skeletons at once whenever you cast a spell, and they deal 40% extra damage, because again, hey, yeah, why the hell not? See, and it's basically, boop, there you get all your skeletons at once, which actually makes them useful, which is nice. Having useful skeletons for a change is cool to have. And then of course you get this, and now the screen is completely covered in skeletons, and yeah, you can imagine how boss fights go with all of this shit. Right, and that's it. I guess I'll see you in the next video. Bye.